So why don't we take a trip to the aisle? Fantasy aisle.
Welcome to our Fantasy Island.
And I want to let you know that Underdog Fantasy is the easiest way to play fantasy sports. It's simple to get started. Just head to underdogfantasy.com or download the app, sign up with promo code SICK, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. Let me go over that again. You can, if you're a desktop person like my buddy Sheridan, you can go just type in underdogfantasy.com. Or if you're with the rest of us in 2022, download the app, sign up with the promo code SICK, and Underdog will double your first deposit up to $100. And by the way, download the app anyways, because they do an incredible job of keeping you up to date with the latest injury news or anything like that. You can follow certain players, and that way you know if their status has changed from healthy to questionable. If you want to keep up on what's happening with David Montgomery, did he practice, did he not? And of course, I don't know when you will have listened to this, but be sure to watch the practice reports. I will say this. So a lot of people have been asking me about Khalil Herbert. What do we do? You pick them up. I love the people who are like, dude, he was gone in my fantasy league forever. And you're like, okay, yeah, I get that. You're a genius. We get it. The people who pick them up or have been holding on to them, you got to play Khalil Herbert. Whether David Montgomery plays or not, Khalil Herbert is going to have standalone value because no matter what, at the very least, David Montgomery is not going to be able to get a full complement of carries. He just can't go out there and run the ball 20, 30 times. It's not going to happen. We saw last year, when Khalil Herbert played really well and David Montgomery returned, and then he just disappeared. He's just like, Pop, Matt Nagy's like, okay, you're out. Like, oh, like you just forgot this player existed. And and listen, if you're asking me, and I wish we had somebody like Draft Dr. Phil on here to refute me, but I'm just going to say it anyways. I feel like when Khalil Herbert is the featured back, he's much better than when he's the change of pace guy. I feel like he needs that rhythm. He needs to get going. He needs to get started. And by the way, if he's the number one guy this week and there's no David Montgomery, it's not going to shock me if Khalil Herbert ends up being the number one fantasy running back of the week. And by the way, there's another guy too who is a backup running back who could get an opportunity to be that top guy this week. And I'm talking about Jamal Williams. DeAndre Swift, I think Dan Campbell said it would take an act of God. Like rain, the sky would have to open up for DeAndre Swift to be able to play this week. And also Amon-Ra St. Brown is also battling some injuries, which means in this matchup this week for the Detroit Lions, which is a very winnable game for them against the Seattle Seahawks, we're going to see a lot of Jamal Williams. And Jamal Williams could end up being the number one guys. Two guys who started the season and I hate to say backup because both of these guys have a lot of ability. Like they're good running backs. They're not traditional handcuffs in a sense of like what you get with a lot of other guys. Like they're not traditional, just, oh, this is a handcuff type player. No. These are good fantasy people. So I think that you need to go ahead and play both these guys without hesitation, even if the starters end up playing. Now, there is a lot of good fantasy football games out there this week, starting with Thursday night, depending on when you're listening to this. The Thursday night game, Dolphins, Bengals. Obviously, you're starting all of those guys. Bills are playing the Ravens this week. The over-under on that game, which I think I'm allowed to mention, is 51 total points, which is probably the biggest number of the weekend. The biggest number for the games are Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, Bengals, Seahawks, Lions, the game we just mentioned a moment ago, and Browns and Falcons. And a hat just fell. I need to fix that thing. So, by the way, if you are watching right now on YouTube or Facebook or something like that, type in the word sick in the comment section. If you just saw the hat fall off the rack over there, type in the word sick and just let me know that you're watching. Thanks to everybody who has been watching and following along. We do appreciate you. Also want to thank everybody who has left a review if you're listening to us as a podcast. And if you are, and if you haven't done so already, please leave a review, a 5-star rating too, if you don't mind. I mean, that would really help us out. If you want to throw us a bone here, we would really appreciate that. Leave us a 5-star review. But the Bengals, the Seahawks Lions, that's a great game. Let me tell you a little something about the Seahawks Lions. Now, when you look at Aaron Rodgers, who is he's a good quarterback. He's fine. If you look at him and Tom Brady's a great start this week, even though that game is up in the air. And by the way, our minds are with everybody in the state of Florida with everything that you're going through. I know I didn't mention this off the top of the show, but to everybody who's listening to us in the state of Florida, if you've had to relocate or what's going on, our thoughts are with you. I know a lot of what we're talking about here is trivial compared to what you are going through right now, but we just want to, my thing is I'm just trying to offer a little bit of a distraction. I don't know what else to say. So we're with you and hope you're doing well. Hope you're keeping safe and we appreciate you. And if this is allowing you to pass a little bit of the time, we're happy that you're joining us here and we hope that you continue to remain safe. But talking about that game, and it's silly to just but the game, it's such a silly transition. We know it's really important, but that Kansas City Chiefs, it's such a terrible transition, but Kansas City Chiefs, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we expect Tom Brady to rebound this week. Plus, Mike Evans is coming back. I mean, it was convenient that Mike Evans got suspended. They hustled through that appeal. Oh, they made sure he served that appeal against the Green Bay Packers. They didn't let that linger for a couple of weeks and let him come back again, be suspended against the Carolina Panthers or something like that. But Tom Brady's a great start. I'm going to tell you something right now. Now, if you're a fan of wrestling, the great Joe Hennig, son of Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, him and I, spent a lot of time talking fantasy football. He had Dak Prescott. He's like, what do I do? And I said, there's two guys you can pick up this week and start. And it's Jared Goff and it's Geno Smith. And Joe Hennig, who we'll have on this show when we play the Vikings, because it'll be fun to talk to him about some fantasy football. He's like, I would rather throw up than start Geno Smith. And I know a lot of people feel that way, but I got to be honest with you. Geno Smith has had multiple touchdowns in 2 out of his last 3 games. He's going up against the Lions, who've allowed the second most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. You don't have to like it. You don't have to enjoy it. I know you never thought you would wander into a fantasy football matchup in week 4 and be like, I think I'm going to play Geno over Aaron Rodgers. And I'm not advocating that. I'm just saying if you're in a dire need for a quarterback and if Geno Smith is available, you got to go and pick him up. I was in the Scott Fish Bowl. I ended up drafting Drew Lock because I thought he was going to be the starter. It hasn't worked out. That's not been a great pick. But of course, everybody else, the rest of them, like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, if you've drafted either one of those guys and you're not 3-0, it's an embarrassment. I'm one of those people. I've had some bad luck, but I'm 2-1 with him, with Josh Allen in those leagues. But I can't. The Lamar Jackson is destroying the league as well. By the way, Nick Chubb, great option. Saquon, Cordell Patterson, Jonathan Taylor. I will tell you, anybody who slept on Amari Cooper this season, I hope you're embarrassed now. Amari Cooper has been a delight. And last week on NFL Fantasy Live, when we were doing Dope or Nope, one of my co-hosts said nope, and I chimed in. I'm like, I don't know if I'd do that, bro. I would start Amari Cooper. You got to get him out there. Also, David Njoku's got a great matchup this week against the Atlanta Falcons, who've allowed the second most fantasy points to tight ends this season. We do love the matchup with the Lions and the Seahawks. Oh, that, by the way, don't forget the Sunday morning game is going to be extra early for a lot of you. 9:30 a.m. on the East Coast. You guys get a little glimpse into what we have to do every week out here on the West Coast. We're doing some more fantasy things. All right, I'm pulling up some notes. But some other guys, I know Javonte Williams is a pretty good matchup this week. Josh Jacobs should be okay. Derek Carr is another guy that you can probably go out and pick up off the waiver wire if you need some help right there. If you need something going on. By the way, we did love what we saw out of not Cooper Rush, but CeeDee Lamb finally stepped up. This was something that happened, not too long ago, is I made a trade where I dealt CeeDee Lamb away. I'm like, I cannot deal with this anymore. I can't deal with CeeDee Lamb and what's going on with Cooper. Although he plays better with Cooper Rush, if you look at the numbers, which is a phrase that I hate. But when you look at the numbers, CeeDee Lamb has played much better with Cooper Rush over the course of the season or over his 3 starts, or it's small sample size. I will tell you this. CeeDee Lamb's pretty good. I traded him for James Robinson in one of those trades that actually helped out both people. I needed a running back. My friend needed a wide receiver. it ended up working out for both parties. Don't be afraid to make trades like that. Speaking of Jacksonville, and I'll just kind of wrap it up with this. We love Trevor Lawrence. Oh, by the way, I did want to say, make sure you're playing Drake London. Like, he's a must start every week. Gabe Davis is a huge start this week against the Ravens. Chris Olave, in most circumstances, would be also be a start, although he's the third of that group. We also have Zach Wilson returning for the New York Jets. I don't know what that means for Garrett Wilson, what that means for Breece Hall. I'm hesitantly playing Breece Hall, but I'm sitting Garrett, which I'm probably going to end up regretting, but starting Deontay Johnson over him. So it's not like I'm putting some scrub in there. I will tell you this, though. Kirk Cousins, I like Kirk Cousins. I know Michael F. Florio does not like him in London, but Kirk Cousins, the last time he was in London, threw for over 400 yards. But people are like, well, it's kind of a primetime game. I'm like, ooh, that's a good point. Oh, I'm still a Kirk Cousins guy. I don't know. By the way, make sure that you watch out for the Dalvin Cook, Alexander Madison news. And remember, that game starts awfully early. So if you have Alexander Madison, before you go to bed, you might just want to slide him into your lineup, and then you can adjust in the morning because you don't want to get burned with Dalvin Cook being a surprise inactive at 6:30 in the morning or 9:30 in the morning. East Coasters can suck it up. It's not that big a deal. This is for my West Coast audience. By the way, if you're on the West Coast, Rip Beer Company in Huntington Beach, California, PCH location, Bears watch party. We had a nice party there. I don't know if I told this story, which I'm going to tell you anyway, Sammy. We had a young lady join us. I think her name was Melissa. She walks in. She's wearing a Khalil Mack jersey. I'm like, hey, welcome. She's like, hey. And then she goes and sits on the other side of the room. And I'm like, oh, what's the deal? I'm like, okay, I don't want to bother this lady. She was walking around. She was holding a baby. She's like hanging out. We're by she's hanging out with the fellow. She wanders by the Bears fans here and there. Like, oh, okay, cool. Like, but I don't want to be pushy or anything like that, because there's nothing worse than thinking somebody recognizes you and then they're like, I don't even like football. You're like, okay, I feel like an idiot. So I wasn't going to make that move. Also, I didn't want her to go walk over to her husband and be like, hey, this bald idiot keeps hitting on me, even though I'm clearly holding a baby and not into, like, you know what? You don't want to put yourself in that kind of situation. But afterwards, she took a photo with me. I'm like, oh my God, you were here? She's like, yeah, I saw this on Instagram. I listened to the podcast. If you are going to meet me somewhere at a bar at Rip Beer Company in Huntington Beach, California, you can come talk to me. That's why I'm there. So we can talk and hang out and watch the Bears games. So, and by the way, make sure you start Trevor Lawrence this week. Make sure Trevor Lawrence, we've been waiting for him to pop fantasy wise. It finally happened. So that was amazing. The other night, 3 touchdowns finally. So now we're starting to see some of the reward on Trevor Lawrence. I will tell you as well, going back and watching the Jacksonville Jaguars game, Travis Etienne is involved. He's ready to go. He's looking good. There's a lot of positivity going on with him. The only problem is we're just waiting for it. Similar to what happened with Trevor Lawrence. We're just waiting for it to translate on the fantasy football world scheme. I don't know how you put it, but in any event, I want to thank Nick for being here today. Great conversation about the New York Giants. And of course, big thanks to Sammy and Anello, who get this show up and running each and every week. We're going to be back Sunday after the game to talk about what happened. Hopefully we will be celebrating another Bears victory. And of course, Tuesday night, it'll be Taken to the Rank. Carmen, Vitali, and me sitting there talking about the Bears' hopeful victory, looking ahead to week 5. Season's cruising right along. So we thank you so much for being here. And with that, Sammy, say bear down and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts. Brought to you by Underdog Fantasy and Air Pura.